From the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
The subject for our program today is entitled New Directions. This is a center at North Idaho College, and there are certainly other places in the United States that are involved with these programs. It is a program for women who are returning to college and after a number of years of not being in formal education, and it has had very great success at this institution and at other places, and it has some federal funding. And we're so pleased to welcome to the program today the director of the New Directions Center at North Idaho College, Carol Hott. Our guest holds a baccalaureate degree in the field of political science from Michigan State University, and she also has a master's degree in guidance and counseling from St. Mary's College in Texas. Carol, it's a pleasure to have you on our program. We have heard a lot about what you do, and we're going in the program today talk about the purposes of that center and some case studies of success of students who have been in the program, and also something about the funding. One of my purposes for inviting you to the program is also to share with others who are not involved with such programs in the Northwest that might want to consider such an activity and how they might not have to reinvent the wheel on some things. And so again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
And I'm so pleased to have regular panelist Steve Schink, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College, and Steve will commence the questioning of our guest today.
Thank you, Tony. Carol, I thought we'd begin simply by setting the stage for the rest of our discussions, and I'd ask you if you would take just a few minutes to tell us a little bit about the mission of the Center for New Directions.
Well, the mission of the Center for New Directions is really to help adults in transition to maximize their potential in the workforce, in education, in life, I guess, where you'd want to be. Our center, like a lot of programs like this, grew out of the displaced homemaker. I don't know if you want to call that a movement, but a displaced homemaker phenomenon that started in the 70s with a large amounts of divorce and women who were, at that time, left without any preparation to enter the workforce. And we've sort of evolved from that into a center that works with a lot of people who need that kind of help. And of course, getting anywhere in the workforce today pretty much means education. So that's how we come into helping people prepare to enter school.
Can you give us a few more examples? Now, you used the phrase, and I think it's pretty key, that adults in transition. And obviously from your last answer, that used to mean recently divorced women, but now you've broadened that definition. What are some other examples of the kinds of adults in transition that you help?
Well, of course, one big example of someone in transition in the current economy is someone who's lost a job, who due to the circumstances of downsizing, closures, or those kinds of activities. We still do see some traditional displaced homemakers, women who have not been in the workforce, but that's getting rarer and rarer. So a lot of the people we help are people who've been in what I call the marginal workforce. They've been in and out of low-paying jobs. They haven't been able to become totally self-sufficient in the workplace. And often, again, that's because of a lack of education or sometimes a lack of knowing how to market the skills they have. Other kinds of transitions could include loss of benefits. The new welfare legislation is going to make it imperative for a lot of women to get out there and figure out what they can do relatively quickly. And we've always worked with a lot of women on AFDC that want to transition back into being working people and productive in the workforce. So those are some of the transitions we see.
Carol, let me ask you another kind of a basic background, set the stage question. I think we understand now the link between your program and education, why it's located at North Idaho College in our community. But this is a pretty common program in other places. And tell us just a little bit about how it's structured, organized, where the money comes from, and how you're set up.
Okay, again, going back way back to the beginning, which was the late 70s and early 80s, most states passed some kind of legislation. This was a severe enough problem, women without means of support, that most states passed some kind of legislation mandating some services to be provided for these women. In Idaho, they passed this legislation in 1980. A lady named Norma Dobler, that some of you remember, was in the legislature for a long time, was responsible for that. But every state in the union either passed some legislation or made some accommodation for this population. They didn't, however, provide a lot of money in most cases for the population. So the majority, later, in I think 82, the federal government passed what was then called the Carl Perkins Vocational Education Act, and included in that a set-aside for programs to help displaced homemakers and single parents, they included, to transition into education or into the workforce. And we're still primarily funded by Perkins money today. That act has been renewed twice now. So,
and I'll follow up real quickly with one more question, and then give this back to Tony. But and this isn't a trick question. You may not know the answer. But we do have an audience in Canada as well. Are you aware of any similar program that serves Canadian residents?
I'm really not aware of a similar program in Canada, but I wouldn't doubt that there are some, because I think the need and that would probably be there.
Thank you.
I'm not sure. I'd be interested to hear.
Well, they certainly could contact this program and
That's
they would
right.
let you know.
That'd be great.
When you were talking about how the program started in the late 1970s, and I had introduced the program indicating that it involved, at that time anyway, displaced homemakers and women.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the program today, as you have expanded from Steve's suggestion of the question, do you also have men in the program?
Yes, we do. Every year, a little between 10 and 15% of the people. We're still kind of known as a women's program, so we don't get a lot, but about 10 to 15% of the people who come to the Center for Assistance are men. And we're seeing a larger number of male single parents now who actually fall under our original parameters for service. And that's interesting, because they have a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same things going on as the women.
What your answer suggests is that there are different types of families today, and there are a lot of families in which there are single parents,
Mm-hmm.
both women and some are men. And also you're indicating that because of change in the status, such as through a divorce, that there's a great change in the economic status. So I hear from the term New Directions that what you're attempting to do is to train individuals so that they can find employment and also can create more stability in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Then what I'd like for you to do for us, Carol, is to, I almost like to do these kind of things in form of assimilation. I'm going to pretend that I am a candidate for your program, and I've come to visit with you. And what I'd like for you to do for our viewers is take us through the application, the process of how I would become a member of your program.
Okay. Well, when you first came in, first thing we'd have to do is give you a parking permit.
Start with the most
So
basic of all.
thing.
And that's important in North Idaho College. There aren't many of those
That's
places
right. We
left.
don't want you get a ticket when you come to see us. We do have it isn't an application, but it is an intake form, and it has some information on it that we want to know in order to help you better. It also has some information that we're required by the state to collect. Because our services are free, we are required to report to our funders certain demographic characteristics. After that, you would meet with...
Can I interrupt to ask? That's be a lot of things about myself, personal things or economic status or
Economic status, level of education, whether you're currently working or not, how many children you're responsible for.
basically what my present condition is.
So that we could kind of get an assessment of where you are.
Is there any section of the application that deals with, I might not have much direction at this point, and again, are there any questions about dreams or goals that I might have?
Not in this form.
At this point.
No. The state doesn't collect that. Then, next, you would meet individually with myself or one of the other counselors at the center, and we would just sort of visited about what you saw as your needs at this time. Rather, they were, we also do personal counseling, and some people come because of personal barriers that they're having trouble overcoming, and that's impacting their ability to provide for their family. We look at education level. We look to see and make sure that you'd had a high school education, that you'd completed that. We'd look at any other kind of educational attainment you had.
Now, if I had not completed the high school and all, then that might be a step in this process, the GED program.
We would at some point first find out how you felt about that, but at some point would encourage you to take that as probably a first step to increasing your employability, and certainly if you intended to further your education. Then we start talking about dreams and plans and goals. Most people have some idea, some don't, but most people have some idea of what they'd like to do if they were able. It's interesting that some of those dreams are things that go way back into childhood, that people will often come back in their late 30s or 40s and say, I've always wanted to do this, and I've just never been able to make it work. I had children too soon, or I took on responsibilities too soon. So if you had no idea, we would do some testing. We do several different assessments. We have do some things called motivated skills assessments that have people go way back in their life and say, what did you enjoy in school? What did you do well in when you were a teenager? What did you do well in your early life? And usually a theme will emerge, that somebody has always done well and felt good about themselves when they were fixing things, or when they were planning things, or when they were teaching things, or that kind of thing. So we can pick up a lot of information from that that might not come across on a standard interest test.
Now, once we've completed all that, first of all, I assume that one would have to qualify for the program from this early interview. But now that I've qualified and you've got kind of a profile, you know, some of my interests and my abilities, and then also things I need to do, then tell us how you start implementation of a program. What does it entail at that point?
Well, we try to have people join our class, which is called Project Reentry. We find that it's a lot more fun for people to do a lot of the things, even some of the things that I've just mentioned, in a classroom setting with a group of people that are all kind of searching at one time. You get more ideas that way. You don't feel so alone that way. And we would have you, if possible, go through our 6-week class.
And let me interrupt again. It's a 6-week class. Is it 5 days a week?
4 days a
4
week,
days a week.
from 9:30 to noon.
So there's a very structured 4-day series. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the structure itself is really helpful. If people have maybe been out of the workforce for a while or never been in it, just that structure of having to get someplace, which means you have to get your kids someplace first, is helpful for people, so that they have a place to go and somebody who's glad to see them when they get there, and provide some structure in their day. Then throughout the class, we really emphasize, and this is something that's kind of gotten a bad rap lately, but we really emphasize building self-esteem and self-confidence. We try to help people throughout the program discover what their talents and gifts are, and they may never have found a way to turn those into anything that resembled economic gain in their life. But we really try to build people up, because if they continue to focus on their problems, their weaknesses, and everything, they'll sabotage any kind of plan that they come up with. At the end of that 6 weeks, people have a plan. We have a lot of employers come into that program to talk about opportunities, so that people have some general goals economically. We have people from the college come in and talk to them about financial aid and all those things, so they know what's available to them and for training and for how they're going to get their money or for your education. And hopefully at the end of that 6 weeks they have a plan and they're off and running.
Now, at the end of that 6 weeks, they terminate their participation in the center?
Well, they terminate their participation in the class. We don't have, actually, we terminate people just by a mandate at the end of every year. We can re-intake them again. but they can come back anytime. And we have a lot of students here on campus that come back and see us periodically to help them problem solve, or to maybe the original plan didn't work out and they need to regroup and start over, and those kinds of things. So nobody ever really has to terminate their association with us. But at the 6 weeks, we hope that they also have a beginning plan, and that they're on their way.
Are there any opportunities in some cases where it's more challenging than others for it to be extended beyond the 6 weeks?
Well, a lot of people come to see us individually beyond the 6 weeks. Mm-hmm.
Steve Sheen.
Carol, let me just follow up on that quickly. Project Reentry, which you've been describing, the 6-week basic course that's part of the Center for New Directions, would that be pretty much the same in Montana or in Washington or in any other state that had a program like yours?
Well, there would not necessarily. There would be some similarities in terms of we all have a very similar goal, so we all have some similar kinds of services, but not everyone runs the group program. Some people work only with people individually. Some people just do little short seminars on various topics. So the services do vary, but the goal is the same. So hopefully they would.
That word similarity triggered another question, and you've already told us that about 90% of your clients are women. Are there other similarities, or are the people who are in the program just all across the board?
Well, I think there are some people certainly that are all across the board, but I do think that there are some similarities in the majority of our clientele, and the majority of them really have not put much time or had to do too much in the way of thinking about careers before, for one reason or another, and still newly divorced people are a large part of our population. There are people who may have had poor experiences, not all, but a lot of them have had poor experiences in earlier education attempts. There are people who have in a lot of cases, a low level of confidence in their ability to learn, that college is a place for them, that they have any business, darkening the doors of an educational institution in a lot of cases. And we try to tell people that you can't really go by your high school experience. You obviously were in a different space in your life, and try to help them put that behind them and really get excited about seeing what they can do educationally. And usually they surprise themselves. Usually they do much better than they anticipated.
What percentage of people who complete Project Reentry go on to continue their education?
I would say, I don't have that, so this is a ballpark guess. We had last year, for the total population that came through the center, and we served about 437, I think, last year. We had a 78% success rate, which included either entering education or entering employment, or in some cases both. For Project Reentry graduates going into education, I would guess that it's about 65% that do go on either into an applied technology program or into a transfer program.
Yeah, and I want to save, I know Tony wants to talk a little bit about individual success stories, so I'll save those student profile questions for him, but I'm just curious, knowing how we're structured here at North Idaho College and knowing that there's similar programs around the nation, do you see students, clients of yours, who take advantage of other services? And I'm thinking specifically of our Small Business Development Center. Do you ever have students who are so successful in Project Reentry that they go right from your program into a plan for a business enterprise of their own?
We have had people do that. That's not the most common option, and one of the reasons is that women, often the women that we see, really need the security and the benefits of a job with a stable employer. But we have had some people start home-based businesses, and we have had some people be really successful with that.
And I'm going to follow up with one final question along that same line. I know we do have other services that are available to to our students, regardless of how they come to us from your program or from other areas. But I'm thinking of financial aid and admissions and placement testing and that sort of thing. Do you help your students transition to that next phase if they're part of that 65% or so,
Absolutely.
50% who want to go on to get in their education?
That is a big part of what we do. We help them be comfortable on campus. We help them access all those services that they may need while they're here. In fact, we have a category now in the admissions software where they track people, that tracks Center for New Directions people entering education. So we'll hopefully be able to provide even some more data about how they do once they're in school. So.
Thank you.
I appreciate Steve giving me this opportunity to do this. I wanted to ask the questions concerning case studies. Oftentimes when I'm teaching, I discuss with students the idea that law cannot just be abstract, that it must have application, and it must have a human face. The same is true of your program, of course. And I think we can assist our viewers in appreciating what you're doing by talking about some individual cases without revealing privacy of individuals. Would you please share with us a success story or two of individuals that came into your program and without that life today would not be as successful as it is?
Well, first I'll tell you my favorite story. We had a woman a few years ago who had not completed her GED, was determined that she wasn't going to, was very scared of the math portion, really, but it came across more as anger. She went through 2 classes. We had our project reentry then, we had another class called Enhancing Workplace Skills. She went through both classes, just kicking and screaming that she wasn't going to do this, but she wanted more than anything to take the graphic arts program here. She was just, and she couldn't understand why she had to have math for that, and went on and on. But we kept encouraging her and kept joking with her and kept trying to encourage her and keep her spirits up. She was probably late 30s, early 40s. And she finally went over and did her GED, and they had a big party for her. Her family did when she got that. She was really proud of herself. She entered I'm not sure if it was the graphic arts or the fine arts program here, but every time there's a pottery sale, we see her work now. So she reached her goal, and that's just one of my favorite stories. I don't know that she'll make money selling her pottery, but she achieved something that she wanted so much. So she's always comes to mind when people ask about successes. We've had others. When we first started working, we had a class for a while specifically for AFDC recipients, and they were ordered to come, and they were very happy about it. And we had 2 people from that first class that went on and were accepted. We help them once in a while when money permits. We actually pay a few credit fees for people if they have no other way of doing it. We put one gal through the summer algebra class so that she could apply for the nursing program. She got into the registered nursing program. In fact, 2 of the gals from that class did, and they're both just doing great now, supporting themselves, their families, and just really happy with what they're doing. We went to their pinning ceremony, so we were really, really pleased with that.
I hear you saying that all individuals coming to your program don't come with the same attitude. Some come screaming and resisting.
And even if they're not ordered, some of them are screaming and kicking. I mean, some of them just had never thought that they would have to do this in their life.
And then others come with great anticipation, excitement, and eagerness to start. That produced another question in my mind that has to do with the success stories, and with this limited time that we have, obviously you could spend several programs just talking about the success of students, but when you do start a new class, a new entry, and particularly if you one that you size it up with maybe some difficulty in those challenges, do you ever bring students back that have had success to let them tell their story to the students as an encouragement?
Well, we often do. And another thing that's been a real phenomenon is that it's been surprising the number of people that we have asked to come and talk to the classes because of their expertise or because of their position in a company who come and tell their personal story, and they may or may not have come through a program like ours, but they will tell that I was once an AFDC mom, I was once married to an alcoholic, I was once a battered woman, and now I've been able to achieve this. And I think, and we do also, as you said, bring past students back, and I think those stories probably have more impact than any of the formal teaching that we try to do, because nothing tells a story, as you said, as well as a success or an example.
That there's light at the end of the tunnel, that
That's
things
right.
can turn
That's
around,
right. And
there
I
can
think
be new direction.
People can be told that, but I think when they see that it makes a big impact.
It's almost like a support group in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Shink.
Carol, we don't have a lot of time left, but we started the program talking or looking back at the history of your Center for New Directions efforts. Let's look ahead a little bit and tell us what you see as the future of funding and the future of the program.
Well, as we talked about, most of our funding is federal money, and because it's federal money and considered job training money, it is going to be put into the block grants as if the current plan goes through at some point, and then we're relatively uncertain. It becomes the state's option then what programs anytime money is consolidated into block grants, there usually isn't as much as there used to be. It's my understanding anyway, and so it will be up to the states what programs to continue and what programs will not continue, and we hope that our success record, our being the 6 centers for New Directions in the state of Idaho, we hope that our success record will allow us to be one of the ones that's still here.
Let's just assume an unfortunate scenario and some cuts in funding. Would many of your students be able to contribute anything toward the cost of your program? Right now, it's fully funded for them, as I understand it.
Well, right now, it's fully funded, although we do charge a fee for Project Reentry, which we will waive our scholarship for anyone who can't afford it. We do see some people who can afford it. It's relatively modest at $75 for the 6-week class. But we don't see many people that are able to pay that, and so relying on fee for service, I don't think would allow us to stay very viable.
And
on that note, I'm so sorry we're out of time. I hate to have to cut Steve off. But on behalf of Steve and our staff, Carol Hott, we thank you for being here as the director of the New Directions and telling us about the success of the students who have come through your program. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this very same time when we will discuss yet another subject, and we think it will be of interest to you. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.